Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. It's lovely to see everybody here, and this is the bit in our service where we get to really dive into the scriptures together, and then reflect a little bit on what we're doing, both as individual Christians and as a church, on the back of that exercise. And today, if we could put the first slide up, please, Yinghao. Today we're continuing in a series that is called Living Church. A lot of people on the street in this country, that might be a surprise to them, that the church is alive, that the church is full of life. People maybe have experiences where they've been to church on the odd occasion and it just felt boring and it felt dead. But Jesus birthed the church to be alive, to be a movement, to be full of the life of the Spirit of Jesus. And we're thinking today and this series about what it means for us here at New River Baptist Church to be full of that life, for that life to be welling up, for us to be catching hold of it, sustaining it together. And if you're new to our church, or you've never really had we've got more of these kind of vision leaflet things on the table in the entrance, and it was basically a chance for us as a church coming out of COVID to think a little bit the journey we've been on up till now. Great, okay, thank you, that's brilliant. A little bit of who we are now, and then on the back page there's a few suggestions what it means for us in the next steps for us as a church. And you'll see there's 5 headings. One of them is discipleship, following Jesus. It says support for each other for each stage of the journey, identifying relationships and resources for the next step on the journey for every church member. Let me say that again. Discipleship, which means following Jesus. Support for one another for each stage of the journey of faith. Identifying relationships and resources for the next step of the journey for every member. So in other words, we're all sat here today, and even if you're just exploring faith, there is a next step for you. And acknowledging, understanding that next step might be, is something that we as a church want to help you to discern. But also we want to support you and let you know that we've got your back. It's not me saying that, it's us as a church saying that, to take that next step. So you might want to be thinking today as we go through the talk today, what does it mean for me to take the next step towards following Jesus? But also we're going to be thinking, actually, what does it mean for us to be taking the next step together? What does it mean for us as a church to be a church followers? And if you've been in church for any length of time, you will have probably done similar exercises in the past. What we're going to do today, reflect on this story in Matthew chapter 19, the story of Jesus and the rich young man. And then we're going to try and extract a few things from that to help us as we try and be a church of followers. So 2 kind of really basic questions which I think a lot of people are asking. First question is, actually, what does it mean to follow Jesus? What does that actually mean? Christian was initially a derogatory term that people used to describe the followers of Jesus in Antioch in the New Testament. And it literally meant little Jesuses, little Christs. You know, you're just a little Christ. That's all you are. And the church in Antioch was like, that's absolutely what we're trying to be. Thank you. We'll wear that as a badge of honor. But the early church had to really work out, what does it mean to follow Jesus? This is one of the questions that gets posed front and center in Matthew chapter 19. I mean, Matthew's not just randomly taken bits of scripture and cobbled it together for any old reason. He wants to help the reader to follow Jesus. He wants to help the church to follow Jesus. And then the second question that gets posed, which we're posing today and which gets expanded a little bit in different bits of Matthew's gospel, particularly gets expanded in the book of Acts and in the epistles in the New Testament, is what does a church of followers look like? What does a church of followers look like? And you might have ideas about that, but also you probably, like me, if you're honest, you've been shaped culturally by a certain expectation of what church looks like, which has probably been your experience of church up till now, a bit of theology of what church is, and a bit of cultural stuff from our surrounding culture. What we're trying to do today is really go back to the Gospels, go back to the Bible, go back to the New Testament to think, what does it mean? So I'm just asking you today, just have an open mind. Let's engage with the scripture together, and let's draw some conclusions when we've done that. So just going to give you a brief couple of things about Matthew chapter 19, and then don't worry, all of you who are part of Rooted, that's when we get into the interactive bit, okay? Just bear with me, just a couple of things, but I think they're things that are points that are helpful. So Jesus and the rich young man, Matthew 19 verses 16 to 30. Matthew's gospel, if you haven't read it recently, is all about the King Jesus and his kingdom. All about that. You can look through it and you'll see mention of king and kingdom again and again and again. Jesus is coming in Matthew's gospel as a teacher in the line of Moses. He's coming as Emmanuel, God with us. He's coming as the Messiah in the line of David. And in chapters 14 to 20, that last point, Jesus as Messiah, the promised one, the anointed one, the one who's going to save the world. Different expectations are set up from different people and bits of teaching from Jesus. Expectations of actually who the Messiah would be, what he would do, and how he would operate. So in chapter 19, the preceding part of chapter 19, we've got a piece on marital faithfulness, what that means in the kingdom, because Jesus is painting this picture. What does it mean to be in his kingdom? We've got some stuff about children, the role of children in the kingdom. Children have a big part to play, it turns out, in the kingdom of heaven. And now we're turning our attention to money. Ooh. Don't worry, there won't be compulsory offering at the end of this talk. You're safe. It's also worth saying that in chapter 20, a number of the points that come out of this narrative about Jesus and the rich young man presented in a different way in the parable of the vineyard owner who is hiring laborers for the vineyard. And do you remember he says he'll pay them a certain amount for labor. But as the day goes on, laborers come and join later in the day, and it gets really near the end of the day and some people are still without work, and the vineyard owner says, yeah, you come in. And then when it gets to the end of the day's labor and the vineyard owner hands out the pay, the people who've come at the beginning of the day are really put out that they've got the same amount of pay as the ones at the end. And that phrase, which we find in Matthew 19 as well, the first shall be last, the last shall be first, gets repeated in that context. I'm familiar with that phrase as a Spurs fan who's absolutely clutched hold of that that one day my team will be first. Turns out it's got a completely different context in Matthew's Gospel. Okay, here's where all of us come in. Questions that get posed in the story of Jesus and the rich young man. Firstly, what does it mean to be religious? Secondly, what does it mean to follow King Jesus as one of his kingdom people? Where do they match up? Where are they different? And so what I'd like us to do, focusing particularly on the early part of the story and the end of the story, you can't help but compare and contrast the rich young man with the rest of Jesus' disciples in this story. And I want to put forward the argument that that's intentional from Matthew. We're supposed to be comparing and contrasting these two perspectives, these two aspects, what it means to follow Jesus. And the reason you've got a sheet of paper is that in a moment we're going to reflect again on the story in a very dramatic way. Some of you will find that helpful, some of you less helpful, but we're going to do it anyway. What I want you to be thinking is compare and contrast the rich young man, the rest of the disciples, and I want you to write down one word that for you either describes the rich young man or that describes the rest of Jesus' disciples, okay? You're going to write that word down as we're going through the drama. Yes, there's a drama. So, volunteers for the drama, and I should point out, just as there are rewards for people in the kingdom of heaven, so there are rewards today for those who participate in the drama. There are sweet things that lie in store for you, both chocolate and sweets, that will be shared among the actors in the drama. So, let's get down to it. I reckon we need a minimum of 4 people for the drama, preferably 5 or 6. We need someone to play Jesus. I should say a lot of parts are male parts. I'm very happy for female actors to play the male parts. I don't have any issues with that, so this is open to anyone and everyone. But we need a Jesus. We need some disciples, so that's where I'm hoping there'll be 2 or 3. Right. Reuben, you got your hand up. What are you going for?